Welcome to Lacrosse Now, and the quarterfinals are going on as we speak for the women as this is being taped, and of course for the men, we've got them on Saturday over the course of the weekend as well. We can't wait for these games to take place, Travis, and I'm really excited to break this stuff down.
Yeah, for sure. He's Tom Eschen, by the way.
Yeah,
I'm
that's
Travis
who I am.
Selger. Just going to introduce
I'm so excited I don't even know my name anymore.
It's a big weekend here in college lacrosse. We're going to talk about all the men's games and a couple of the women's games that we know so far. So we're taping this toward the tail end of Loyola Boston College. So if that game ends on the women's side, we'll talk about it at the end. We already know that the Maryland women are moving on with the win over Florida. So we will talk about that game at the end of this podcast, but mostly men's stuff because we hit on all the women's quarterfinals on Tuesday. We're going to hit on the men's quarterfinals here today. We got some terrific guests. Matt Brandau, the attackman from Yale, maybe one of the best attackmen in the country with how he's playing right now.
No, not maybe. He is.
He
Travis.
is one of the best attackmen in the country. He's been
the first team All-American.
Yeah. And Ben DeLuca, the head coach from Delaware, also joins us. Talk about the upset over Georgetown. And he looks ahead to play his alma mater, Cornell, and the team he took to the Final Four back in 2013, now facing off against them for the right to go back to the Final Four. All sorts of storylines there.
A lot going on. Let's begin with the game with maybe some of the most storylines, I guess. Maybe one of the more intriguing. Maryland, Virginia.
Title rematch.
Let's just start digging into this stuff because Travis has some opinions on this. I'll let you go first because you seem you're very strongly on the side of the Cavaliers here.
So we talked about this. We talked about this on Tuesday, and when you look at how things are playing out, this very well may be the toughest test for Maryland on their way to winning a championship this year. And it comes in the quarterfinal round, and a lot of it has to do with Virginia knowing how to handle this time of year. Like, other than Yale, of the teams that we have left in this tournament, nobody has the experience of Virginia.
Right.
It's Yale, Maryland, and Virginia are the teams that have been there here over the last handful of years of the guys that are left. And nobody has the experience of Virginia because they've won back-to-back championships. Now, I was digging through this matchup, and so Maryland has been so good all year, including the 23-12 win in the regular season over Virginia. But digging in to what happened in that game and what has happened since gives me a feel on the way in which Virginia needs to do this. You look at the face-off X. Let's start there in the first meeting between these two. Gabe Broad and Petey LaSala won only 35% at the X against Luke Weirman. And Luke Weirman's been unbelievable. First-team All-American face-off man, one of the best in the country.
And they've always, at Maryland, done a great job of having it be a unit.
Right.
You know what I mean? Their face-off guys and their wings have always worked together really well, which has helped his success, too.
But Petey LaSala has been better as of late. Now, hasn't been facing Luke Weirman. But I just have a hard time thinking Virginia is going to be held to 35%.
Okay.
So a couple of extra possessions. Make it 40, 45%. Handful of extra possessions. You look at what Maryland did offensively, and this is probably the bigger key than the couple extra possessions they try to steal away at the face-off X. Keegan Kahn goes off for 7 points. Anthony DeMeo goes off for 6. You know what that tells me?
This is in the first game?
In the first game.
Between these two. Okay.
Yeah.
Just you know
what that tells me?
What's that tell you?
The guys that are not named Cole Kastner need to do better because Logan Wisnauskas didn't kill Virginia in the first game. It was Kahn and DeMeo and all the supporting cast for Maryland. Virginia's defense has been better here in the last couple of weeks, and specifically the short sticks and some of the other guys, whether it's Cade Saustad or Quentin Metsui. Those are the guys that are going to make the difference because I actually do like Cole Kastner's size matches up really well with Wisnauskas. Like he's one of the few close defensemen in the country that size-wise is actually more imposing than Wisnauskas is as an attackman. So that matchup actually works. So Wisnauskas is going to get his, he's going to get 3-4 points, and you can win. It's the other guys. You can't have Keegan Kahn going off for 7 and DeMeo for 6 and expect to win this game.
The only thing with Keegan Kahn, I'll stop you briefly there, is that was his launching point. Because prior to that in the season, he hadn't been heard from much. And I think that was the point where he started to click with the rest of the offense. And I don't know if the Virginia matchups were exactly indicative of his impact moving. Because he was, after that game, he continued to produce game. It wasn't just, that wasn't itself in a vacuum. Keegan Kahn was great after that, too.
No, I know. But what I'm saying is Virginia's defense will adjust to that.
Okay.
They're not, because, you look at...
No one else has been able to.
I mean, Keegan Khan's not averaging 7 points per game.
He's not averaging that, no, but he's still been impactful.
He's been impactful. I would argue Anthony DeMeo is their second best offensive player from what we've seen here down the stretch for Maryland. So then you got to figure out like who gets the poll. Kastner takes Wisnauskas. I think Sawstead, if you watch back at some of the matchups in that first game, he was matched up against Keegan Khan. Khan still beat him. I think Sawstead has to be better. Matsui has to be better, and the short sticks have to win more of their matchups. Like that, for Virginia, it all honestly comes down to as simple as that. Because offensively, like you look at the guys that for Virginia, they were hanging around. It was 15-11, and Maryland ran away with this one. Like the 23-12, as big as it was, those last 3 or 4 goals that Maryland put in, the game was over.
Yeah. Okay. So I mean, it was still 23-12.
It was still 23-12. But what I'm saying is, it's big. Like it's not an 11.
It went from like 18-12 to 23-12.
But if I'm Maryland, I can't look at this. If I'm a Maryland fan, I can't look at this game and say I was 11. You won by 11 goals. But entering this matchup, I am scared to death that I am not 11 goals better than this Virginia team that I'm about to see on Sunday.
No, and you heard that. I was reading the Inside Lacrosse article with Coach Tillman and how still frustrated and matching up with an ACC opponent again here in the quarterfinal. And I think that is more indicative of how they feel about Virginia than compared to their first matchup. You know what I'm saying? They're not evaluating Virginia then. They're just saying, here's another tough ACC opponent in Virginia that we have to play, and that makes it for a really big challenge.
I mean, I honestly think this is like the worst possible matchup for Maryland.
Yeah.
Out of all the teams left. Like, who would I would rather play anybody else.
Of the teams left, yeah. I think it makes it difficult, and it is what it is. I mean, we have to, this is the game, so you have to play who's in front of you.
No, you're right. But and the other thing.
I don't think that means they're going to lose.
The other thing I'm going to say is that Matthew Nunes was actually pretty good in the first meeting. He gave up, I think he ended up giving up 20 goals, but he made 14 saves. So if he saves double-digit saves again, the defense stops it does a slightly better job. I have faith in the Virginia offense to score against Maryland, even against Maryland's defense. I have faith in Virginia's offense to score. You look at the first meeting, both Matt Moore and Connor Schellenberger got theirs. Mm-hmm. I think they each had 5 points. That's fine. Like, so you got the knowns that are going to score. It's, can you stop them at the other end? Yeah. And that will be the biggest challenge. And I do think that Virginia has the personnel to be able to do it. Now the question is, can you do it on the field?
I'll start with Nunes and sort of thinking about that. Obviously a freshman, I thought he played really well in the first round too. Maryland has the highest shooting percentage in the country. They shoot 40.8%. And you look at the times where they have had battles this year. That was against Notre Dame, and you can say Princeton a little bit. I mean, that's as close as it got for
Syracuse was closer than Princeton.
And Syracuse as well. I looked at the Notre Dame-Princeton games just because of teams that, I thought were some of the best in the country down the road. They shot 27% against Notre Dame. And obviously that was the closest matchup they had. Entenmann had 10 saves in that game. Eric Peters had 19 saves for Princeton.
Huge game.
And they still scored 15 goals. So what that tells me, as you look at the save percentage, is more important than the amount of saves that they will make in this game. And Nunes, 40th in the country in that category. He's stopping 51% of the shots he faces. And Maryland takes a lot of shots. So if you're going to be able to stop them, Nunes is not going to have just to be double digits. It's going to have to be 15, 16, 17, 18 saves. That's where it needs to start for Virginia to be able to win and have a chance at the end of this game.
I will defend Nunes with his numbers on the season because it's the way in which Lars Tiffany and Virginia play.
It's a style
he traditionally sees more shots than most other goalies, so his numbers are likely going to be lower than some other goalies in the country.
Yeah, he had. I mean, if
and
you
he also has.
He does see more shots.
There have been some games that he hasn't been great. You're right.
But there are some games he didn't have double-digit saves in every single game.
No.
There were just, I think, a handful of games in which he had double-digit saves. Those were against some of the better teams that got the shots off and that he had to stop them. And sometimes that was successful, and sometimes it wasn't. So that is number one with me. Nunes has to be outstanding.
He's got to be great.
He can't have like Liam Entenmann because of Notre Dame and then their defense. He could have 10 saves and Notre Dame be in there. It's got to be more of the Eric Peters 19 saves and hope your offense can keep up on the other end. So to me, that's where it needs to start for Virginia. And then I wonder, I was looking at some of the man up, man down. These teams, Virginia hasn't had a lot of opportunities in the man up. Maryland hasn't had a lot of opportunities in the man down. When they have, Virginia has executed, and this is one of the few things that Maryland hasn't done well this year. They are 60th in the country. They have one of the fewest times they don't foul a lot, so that has actually helped them in that aspect. But if, like you said, this offense for Virginia can cause you to maybe do some things that are out of character, and Virginia being efficient in that category, top 6 in the top 5 in the country in the man up. If some of those things were to happen, that's where you can get a couple goals as well. So there's another reason I'm agreeing with you that Virginia, maybe there's some things that can go their direction. But then I wonder, and yeah, you talk about Virginia being a tournament team, and this is where they peak each time of year. And I just was wondering, I look at Virginia this year, and yeah, they had head-scratching losses and games in the past couple years. They are missing something this year, in my estimation. And the last two times they went and won the championship, they had Ryan Conrad in 2019. They had Dox Aiken a couple years later. And I feel like they don't have that guy in the midfield who's going to do it all for you when it counts the most. And there's other guys that have helped fill that void, sort of not in one person in name, but that's just such a tough matchup and such an outlier in the middle of the field that plays up and down. And I don't think Virginia has that this year. And I think that to me is the biggest difference in this matchup compared to some of the ones they've had in the past.
That is fair. And I think you're right. They don't have the standout All-American midfielder like a Conrad or an Aiken. But I will say, you look back at the two runs the llast two times, whether it's 2019 or 2021, and it's been the short stick D-middies that were guys that nobody talked about until the tournament. And they had 3-4 great games, and all of a sudden, they're the guys that you want to talk to on the field afterward because of what they did. And you look at some of these short stick D-middies like a Grayson Soliday, or like I do think there are guys on this roster that have the ability to do it. I think you look at the other thing with Virginia that I think makes them maybe a more difficult matchup, I think even than Yale, is the fact that not only do they have the top-end talent to contend with Maryland, but I think they have the depth of talent to contend with the depth of Maryland. Now, Maryland may have a little bit more high-end stuff deeper in the roster, but Virginia's not far behind. Like, you look at the recruiting classes and the people that they've brought in, the guys that are 4th, 5th, 6th options on offense for Virginia are good options and have the ability to go off for those 4 or 5 goals. The question is, can one of them do it? Because I do think this game is not going to be decided by the knowns. I really don't think it is, because you look back at the other meetings, like it's some of the other guys that come up with 2 or 3 goals that maybe don't typically do it that are the reason that somebody's in a game or somebody's not. And so I do think that it's the options 4, 5, and 6 on both these teams that are the reason somebody wins.
Are you picking Virginia?
Yeah, actually.
Right.
I don't know why, after all I've seen from Maryland all year and how dominant they've been, and I have a really, especially after how they closed against Brown on the road, you start flashing back to what we saw the last 2 times.
I know.
And I doubted, like, I kind of doubted Virginia both of the last 2 times. I did not think that they were going to be the team that was hoisting the trophy on championship weekend, and we get to Monday, and look who's back.
So, I mean, and that means you're probably picking Virginia to three-peat. I mean, if you really go down that road, but you don't have to do. I'm not going to make you do that right now.
I don't know.
I'm not making you do that right now.
I picked Maryland to go to the Final Four, but now seeing this matchup,
that's okay. I'm on the side of Maryland.
I know you are.
I think I've seen too much.
As most people should be.
And I realize there's the X factor of Virginia in the tournament, and I just think that this time around there's too much to overcome to be able to really turn the water all the way on. They could do it against Brown. Brown peaked at the end of the Ivy League season, in my estimation, and that was great. They had a nice run there. They were fun.
Yeah.
And Virginia, knowing what it takes at this point, and some of these Ivy League teams are going to experience that now in this round, particularly of just not having that experience. But Virginia, yes, they did it against Brown. I think Maryland's just too tough. I've seen too much. I saw Maryland dominate. They held Rutgers to single-digit goals twice.
Yeah.
And you saw Rutgers in the first round of the tournament go off for 19 against Harvard. So you're like, how did Maryland do that? No one scored more than 13 goals against Maryland all year long, and that was high point in week 1. So I just can't bring it. I want you look at the matchup, you look at the history the last couple times around, but it's just I've seen too much from Maryland. And until they don't do what they've done all year long, I can't pick against them.
Well, just look at what happened at Georgetown on Sunday. They didn't do that all year, and then all of a sudden.
That is true.
I mean, like, and we're going to talk about it in a second. I really do think that Maryland winning by 11 the first time actually helps Virginia.
I think that helps Virginia.
It's like, I mean, if you're Virginia, you're playing Maryland, like you just said, I think most of the lacrosse world is on your side. Like, no one's picking against Maryland.
It doesn't happen often.
No, I know. But no one's picking against Maryland, and there's no reason to.
Right.
I feel dumb picking against what we've seen.
There's a reason everyone's so excited about this matchup, because people do think Virginia has a chance.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And they think it's the toughest competition for Maryland moving forward. So that means there are, there's reasons, like I tried to help, and tried to point out, I think there are ways that Virginia can win this game.
They need to play a pretty perfect game.
Yeah.
And Maryland can't be at their best. Which
it's been rare.
It hasn't happened.
I don't think it's happened all year long.
That's been the most surprising thing about Maryland. They haven't had an off week.
No, they haven't. All right.
Speaking of the Georgetown
let's
debacle,
get to the next game here.
Let's go Delaware and Cornell.
Yeah, this
is the Ben DeLuca Bowl. Of course, Ben DeLuca played at Cornell, then went on to coach at Cornell, led them to the Final Four. The last time the Big Red were in the Final Four back in 2013. He makes his stop at Duke. Then he went to Harvard. Now he's a head coach at Delaware. And Delaware's in the quarterfinal round for the first time since 2007. And guess who Ben DeLuca's playing against?
That's pretty amazing.
The storylines here are incredible. We're going to hear from Ben DeLuca here in a second, but we want to break down this game first. Delaware, I think, shocked a lot of people, including myself, despite the fact I've seen them all year.
And you said, hey, watch out for Delaware.
I said to watch out for Delaware. And I thought they could give Georgetown a game. But not only do they give them a game, but the fact that it wasn't a situation where they jumped out to a lead and just held on.
No.
They came from behind. They were down by 2 goals in the fourth quarter, and they played it perfectly down the stretch.
There were 3 minutes and 30 seconds to go. They were down 9-7. So it wasn't even like a game that's like 15-13. We're like, anybody can rattle off 3 goals at any point. You have 7 goals against Georgetown, the best defense in the country. And Delaware still, I don't know how, but they were able to do it. And there's some magic involved there, too. You got to believe that, too.
Well, and they executed on offense.
Yeah.
And so you look at this matchup against Cornell, and I think a lot of anybody across the country that knew anything about Delaware, if you haven't watched a lot of the CAA, you knew about the offense. Because Mike Robinson and Ty Kurtz have made highlights left and right throughout their careers with Mike Robinson go off for the 9 goals last year in a game, and Ty Kurtz has gone off for 7 or 8 goals in a game. Both of them have the ability to score in absolute bunches. You saw Mike Robinson with the BTB goal. But the reason Delaware is still playing is the defensive end of the field. Whether it's Matt Kilkeary in goal, who has really come on strong here down the stretch, or Owen Grant at close defense, who can hang with any #1 offensive player in the country. He's showing that. And even in the games that Delaware lost against good competition this year, he was winning his matchup. Like, he was doing his part. The rest of the defense, though, has stepped up. And especially, you look at the short sticks for Delaware. And one of the things that actually has emerged here in the CAA tournament and now into the postseason, the NCAAs, is that Reed Kurtz, the younger brother of Ty, has gotten a short stick back in his hands. And so he's kind of gone to short stick D-Midi because Tate Wasson, who was a top 40 defensive recruit in the country coming in, has been banged up the last couple of years, is finally healthy. So they put him at close defense. You move Reed Kurtz, who's had to play close defense his whole career despite having not played close defense until he got to college. You put him back in a more familiar role at the short stick spot, and it strengthened the short stick position for Delaware, who can run a bunch of guys. Jason Siders had a really good run here as a short stick D-Midi as well. And that strength, I think, you saw against Georgetown, because despite the fact that Georgetown didn't shoot well and Kilkeary was great, Delaware defensively also did a really good job against the Hoyas. Yeah,
I do think Cornell, in that same aspect you just mentioned, so if you shut down one guy, who stops the other? And you have the top 2. Cornell's the only team in the nation with 2 guys in the top 20 in points per game, and Piatelli and C.J. Kirsch. So that is #1. If you stop one, what do you do with the other one, I think is the most important thing that they have to focus on. Piatelli leads the nation in goals per game. And I think maybe this Cornell offense somehow has gone a little under the radar, it feels like, right? I mean, I don't know if a lot of people have talked about them in the same realm as the Rutgers offense or the Maryland offense, of course, at the same fold, and Yale or whatever it might be. But their offense, when it is going, it is scary because they can rattle off 4, 5, 6 goals. Delaware has to be able to prevent that on the defensive end. And like you said, some of those guys that aren't the top close defensemen are going to have to really, not just survive their matchup, but win their matchup for the majority of this game where Cornell can get out and going and start scoring 14, 15 goals. On the other end for Cornell, you wonder if, like you said with Delaware and the knowns, you've got the Robinson and you've got Kurtz and Beta has also been involved. You need the other guys, and you touched on this for Virginia and Maryland, the unknowns. I think that plays a bigger part in this game because you look at the teams that had success against the Cornell defense down the stretch. Army, one of those teams, scored 17 goals, and that was spread around. Nick Turn didn't go off in that game by any stretch of the imagination. Adler did a pretty good job. 2 goals or more for 6 different players in that game. In the game against Syracuse for Cornell, that was out of nowhere. What was going on? Curry went off. I think he had 4 and 1 in that game. He played pretty well. Syracuse had 9 different goal scorers in that game, too. So for Delaware, it's got to be about some of these other guys that we saw making the impact late against Georgetown to be able to get the job done here. I don't know if they can do it because that's a tough thing to be able to go out and do again. But, I mean, that's what has to happen for Delaware to be successful in this fold against the Cornell defense that, yes, at times has been dominant, but then you've seen where some of the cracks are, and that's in that depth on the defensive end.
Yeah, no, I think you hit on the different guys. I mean, we talked about Drew Linkaitis for Delaware, who had 5 points against Georgetown. Him winning matchups was a huge difference maker because him beating a short stick D-Midi for Georgetown, and they have some of the best in the country. So him winning, and you saw it at the end of the game, like him winning that matchup.
Jeez, goal line extended,
beating,
man, that move.
Beating an All-American defensive midfielder to find J.P. Ward for a step down is the difference between winning and losing games this time of the year. Like you need your guys who are your second and third midfielders who are going to get the short stick matchups have to win them. Because chances are, like, you're only going to get so many chances for your number one to beat their number one, especially in this matchup. So honestly, I'll be very interested to see who Adler gets because while Robinson and Kurtz both at times have shown dodging abilities, neither one of them are like breakthrough athletes that are going to win every individual matchup. J.P. Ward is probably more the dodging threat. So then when you're looking Cornell defensively, who off ball is going to be able to handle Robinson and Kurtz, who are as crafty as anybody in terms of finding their way to get their shots off?
Yeah, I think you're right. You almost forget about J.P. Ward in that fold because the other two have been so impactful in their shooting. One more thing that there were a lot of circumstances, you could say, to the Delaware win over Georgetown. That's a game at night on the road, a lot of energy in the air. This is a 12 p.m. face-off on Sunday in Ohio in what will be probably pretty warm in Ohio. It's going to be warm everywhere, I think around the East.
Yeah.
I just don't know if those things changing so much could also impact things maybe negatively for Delaware because you get that kind of feeling, it's night, it's under the lights, you kind of like, okay, we're kind of feeling this no matter where you are. You know what I mean? I feel like there's a different vibe there that they're going to have to contend with in Ohio and more of a neutral type feel, whether that it's just a little bit different. You're not on the road it's not the same kind of feel. It's just a little bit of a different vibe that they might have to overcome a bit against Cornell.
But I'd argue because Cornell hasn't been there, like when Cornell, not only have they not been to the championship weekend, like they haven't been on this stage in a while. Like I think that plays into Delaware's favor too. Like you've got two teams that this is all new to.
Yeah.
Like this stage, this atmosphere, it's all new. And I'm going to be honest, you know who the one guy on both these sides that's been there? It's Ben DeLuca.
Yeah.
If there's anybody who has the veteran presence and the leadership to lead their team to championship weekend, it's DeLuca. So in terms of like experience, I think you have to give. He coached Cornell's Connor Busick in college.
Yeah.
Like he was the coach when Busick was part of the team that went to the Final Four back in 2013.
Yeah, and so Connor Busick maybe learned a thing or two.
I'm sure he did. But Ben DeLuca is the guy. He has led a team to championship weekend before.
I do think this game will be close. it's hard for Delaware to be able to do what they did again. And this is going to be a very different game than compared to the Georgetown.
Completely different.
It's going to be a whole different vibe.
I think this is a much more familiar game for Delaware in terms of pace-wise. I think this will be a game that they will fall a little bit more into what they're comfortable in.
And I think Cornell's very comfortable with that.
I think this could be a really fun game. This is the Delaware team that was ranked top, I think, 15 in the preseason. That's probably, that's the way they played at the end of the year. They did themselves no favors in how they played non-conference play in the beginning of CAA play.
Yeah, they lost 19-14 at Duke, 18-8 at Michigan, and 18-13 at Nova. So that, to me, I understand that this is a different team. It just questions.
But they just beat Georgetown.
That's why I wonder, can you go do that again? That really concerns me. To be able to back that up once again, that's just the only thing. Yes, they show the potential to, but can you capture all of that once more or twice more down the road?
The fact that the defense they played in the CAA tournament changed is what the difference is. Because the offense has kind of been there throughout the year. So some of those games they did not play. Like that Michigan game, Coach DeLuca has admitted that was probably their worst performance of the year. A lot of things went into it. They learned a lot. It was a big-time learning experience. But their defense has changed the game. One thing to note, Delaware won that game against Georgetown, winning 9 of 22 faceoffs.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, James Riley is one of the best faceoff guys in the country. He's top 10 in the nation. Logan Premtage did just enough. That should not be as big of an issue. This should be more of a 50-50 type game against Cornell.
Okay. We'll look forward to it. And we also look forward to this. Travis caught up with the head coach of Delaware, Ben DeLuca, this week. Take a listen.
So we have Delaware coach Ben DeLuca joining us now. The lacrosse world is talking about the Blue Hens, and deservedly so after what you guys did, knocking off the 2-seed Georgetown on Sunday night. What clicked? Because, I saw you guys play, and it felt like it clicked in the CAA tournament, and maybe you even took it to a different level, whether it was Wednesday in the win over Robert Morris or then on Sunday.
Yeah, well, listen, first of all, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it, Travis. Super proud of our young men. Our leadership has stepped into overdrive. It's been a few weeks now. Heading into the conference tournament for sure was an important piece of it for us, but I just can't say enough about our captains and our upperclassmen, how they performed and prepared with our backs against the wall week after week in that conference schedule, and then came through in the conference tournament and have carried that on here in the NCAA tournament. And it's really all about them. It's been their preparation, their mindset, and their execution throughout the week. And then you guys get a chance to see that. We all get a chance to see that on game day, and it's made us all very proud.
I've looked at your team all year, and I know you have, and you see the pieces there, and it's felt like this is what could have happened, but so often it doesn't happen at the right time of year. When did you feel like this team kind of came together and it was starting to play at the peak that I think you probably expected going into the season?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think we saw flashes of it all season long in some of our early season wins and in some of our early season stumbles as well. We were just looking for that consistency. And I do think that, after we dropped a couple really tight ones in our conference to start our conference tournament, we had our backs against the wall there heading into the Towson game in the regular season. And, we had some continued conversations with our leaders and with our team. And we got to a point where it was like, we have to get it done here. This is it. And our guys have responded. And again, it's been anything but pretty. It's been a work in progress the entire time. And I just am super excited about being able to play what I think is our best lacrosse at this stage, at this time. But every step of the way, our guys have invested in that process. They've worked incredibly hard throughout the season and adjusted and pivoted when necessary. And to see the pieces start to fall into place and overcoming injury, overcoming COVID, overcoming all the different types of adversity and opposition that we've had to find ourselves where we are is really exciting.
I think people knew some of the offensive players like Mike Robinson or Ty Kurtz from some of the big numbers they put up in different games over the last couple of years. But I'm really glad people are seeing Owen Grant get to play on this stage, because what he did on Sunday with some of those checks and takeaways, along with the rest of your defense and Matt Kilkeary, was special. Owen Grant, how do you describe what he has meant to that end of the field?
Hard to put into words, Travis. He's critically important. And, not just because of some of the highlight reel plays that he makes, but his leadership in the huddles, his leadership off the field. He is a special young man, works incredibly hard. He is tough as nails. And I think our guys feed off of that. And our ability to use him in different roles. He can play down low. He can play in the midfield, in the middle of the field. He can come off of the wings of faceoffs. He can handle the ball on the offensive end. He's such a dynamic threat. It's critical for how we play, not just in the defensive end, but up and down the field. We want to play fast. We want to get up and put some pressure on our opponent. And he gives us that ability to defend really well with discipline, get the ball up off the turf when necessary, and then advance it and be a threat in the offensive end as well.
Logan Premtage at the faceoff X, I don't even know if he was as good as he was on Sunday in the CAA tournament when he was facing off. Against one of the better faceoff units in the country, you guys found a way. What have you seen from him, and what did that group as a unit figure out?
Well, I give a ton of credit to Coach Wilkes, who directs our faceoff unit, and Logan in particular leading the charge for us there. Just persistence in his technique, persistence in preparation for who he's going against, and adjusting week to week, because there's a certain amount of, hey, we want to do this to have success. But if that's not working, we have to be able to adjust. It's that rock, paper, scissors type of scenario at the faceoff dot. And Logan has been fantastic with his preparation and his versatility, and just persistence of seeing it through and fighting through the ups and downs of the season and clicking at the right time. And it's never one guy either. We really want and enjoy having a 3-man unit, guys coming off the wings. Sometimes Logan is able to win it, or sometimes it's guys coming off the wings that are picking it up, and sometimes the other team wins the draw technically from a statistical standpoint, but we're able to then potentially create a turnover and ultimately create possession for our team. So those guys are working well together as a unit, and we utilize all members of our team in the box defensively, in the box offensively, anything that we can to scrap and claw to get possession.
So here it is. You get to within a step of the Final Four, and you're playing against your former team in Cornell. When that's the matchup, what are some of the emotions that you've gone through?
Well, the first thing I'll say is it's not about me. It really isn't. It's about our team. It's about the guys on this team. It's about our program and the mission that we have. So Cornell is the next opponent, and they're very good. It's my alma mater. I love Cornell and I love that program. But there aren't a lot of emotions for me that I'm going to allow to get in the mix here. It's really about the Blue Hens and our preparation for our next opponent, and a very talented and skilled and well coached opponent at that.
And I mean, obviously they're coached by a guy that well, Connor Pusick. What was he like to coach as a player? And I'm sure you probably saw a little bit of this leadership when you were coaching him.
Oh, absolutely. Recruited him to come to Cornell. He was a great attackman out of St. X in Ohio, and brought him to Cornell, and actually, needed him to change positions. He came in as an attackman, and we felt like, big, strong, athletic, competitive, football guy. I loved the physicality of the game, and that he would make a really good midfielder. And at the time, we had a really solid attack unit, and he was struggling to break into that lineup. So his ability to move to the midfield in a very selfless move there, and learn a new position and figure that position out, was a credit to his character as a teammate. Passionate, fiery young man that was very competitive, still is very competitive. I think you see it on the sideline, these days. He showed it in college. He showed it in the pros, and with his time in the international game as well. Just a high quality young man, comes from a great family. Certainly one of my favorite Cornell guys to have a chance to recruit and coach.
It kind of almost feels like it's fitting for you to be playing Cornell when the year that Richie Moran passes, and all the outpouring of support for him. Just what did he mean to you in your career, and now playing Cornell, that probably has to be a little special piece of your heart that knows that he'll be looking down, watching this one for sure.
Yeah, Coach Moran was one of a kind and changed my life for the better, immensely. Can't probably I don't have enough time or the right words to describe the impact that he's had on me and my family. It wasn't just me. He recruited me to come to Cornell, gave me the opportunity to go to that great university and get a great education and learn from him, and then inspired me in many ways to carry on in the coaching profession and to help build that program, back to what some of the things that he was able to do during his time. And more than that, off the field, was just such a great mentor and a leader for me. His influence on me off the field, far outweighs anything that he taught me about the game of lacrosse, what he taught me about about life and how to be a good father, how to be a good husband. Just, goes without saying, his impact will be felt for generations. And I'm very, very grateful to have known him and had a great relationship with him over the years. During our time in Ithaca, my wife had a chance to coach his granddaughter. His granddaughter babysat our kids. Had a chance to spend a lot of time with Coach in his retirement, and he continued up until his passing to have a major influence on me, what I'm doing, and a lot of the things that I continue to do, I hope are a good reflection on the things that Coach Moran taught me.
Yeah, he was a special guy and an important part of the community up there in Ithaca, and obviously for Cornell lacrosse. I'll leave you with this, because Dino Babers, Syracuse head football coach, said this early on in his career. He said that I need belief without evidence. And every new coach who walks into a program has to have a little bit of that, because you're walking into a program where you haven't done this before. What does that win and this run of the NCAA tournament do for what you're trying to get this whole program and all the players you recruit to buy into there at Delaware?
Well, I think our guys already bought in, to be honest with you, Travis. I think that was a byproduct of the investment that our guys have made in our process, in our culture. It has been a constant message for our staff since we've stepped on campus here. Belief in themselves, belief in their teammates, belief in the program and our process. And to see it play out the way that it did Sunday night is terrific. It truthfully wasn't very surprising for my staff and I, knowing how hard our guys work and what they've done to get themselves to this point. But I love that quote, and it is something that we talk about a great deal. We talk a little bit about the gap between knowing and doing. Our guys early on, they knew. We taught them, what they needed to know in addition to what they already had known in the game of lacrosse. And we're in film sessions, we're on the field in practice, and they know what to do, but their ability to do it at times was inconsistent. And, we talk about the bridge between knowing and doing is belief. And I think our guys have had that for quite a while. And I think that's evidence for you guys to see Sunday night and the Wednesday before that as well. And, go back to a number of games and successes that this program has had over the course of the last couple of years.
Yeah, backs against the wall. A couple weeks into the CAA season, and here you guys are still playing with the Final 8 teams of the country. Coach, well-deserved. Congratulations on the big win. Can't wait to see you guys again in action this weekend against Cornell.
Thanks so much, Travis. I really appreciate it.
Huge thanks to Coach Ben DeLuca for taking some time. He's been a pleasure to talk with all season long here, and I feel good for him to be back leading this Delaware team. And then you see what happened last year when last year's team was supposed to be maybe the team that was doing this, and they get upset in the CAA semis, and here they are, the team that maybe people didn't think going into the CAA tournament would come out, and here they are. They're one win away from championship weekend.
One win away.
Wild.
You saw what happened last year, with the CAA and how the last couple of times around they've given everybody everything they could handle.
Toughness.
So that's what it's all about.
Speaking of crazy, how about this? Either Delaware, Cornell, Penn, or Rutgers, one of those schools is going to be playing for a national championship this year. How awesome is that?
Delaware, Cornell, Penn, or Rutgers. Wow. Yeah.
I was looking at the bracket earlier this week, and it dawned on me that one of those teams, somebody that, going into the year, maybe Penn out of that group, you would think.
But with Cornell and Penn, Ivy League.
You didn't know.
You go back to it in the Ivy League for those kids to be that good, for this league to be that great. And you'll hear that in a moment. We'll talk to Matt Brandau, and I asked him, I'm like, what was the deal, man? Why do you guys play so well? He gives a great answer, so stay tuned for that.
But we're going to start by talking with this Penn-Rutgers game, which the winner of this game will meet the winner of Delaware-Cornell in championship weekend. What stands out to you about this game?
We talked about it on Tuesday. Penn with their knack for close games.
Flair for the dramatic.
You know who else has a flair for the dramatic? Rutgers. Rutgers has 1-goal wins this year against Loyola, Stony Brook, Michigan, and Penn State, and a 2-goal win against Ohio State. They didn't lose any of those games. Penn has a 1-goal loss to Princeton and Yale. They have their 1-goal wins over Duke overtime, Penn State, Villanova, St. Joe's overtime, and now Richmond in overtime. But I do feel like that, Penn had sort of had that to their advantage. Yeah, close games, that's their thing. But Rutgers has had some experience in that as well, in which those games for Rutgers obviously were so key for them and getting that bid to the tournament, knowing how great Maryland was this year. Those 1-goal games could have gone either way, and you lose a couple of those, you're not even playing right now.
Right.
So to me, that kind of negates maybe Penn's advantage in the close game because Rutgers has been there and done that against good teams, and they've been able to get over the top. So yeah, I think that Rutgers is at a point where they take on a Penn team coming off an overtime win against Richmond. I don't know which one is better for these teams. It's a 19-9 win for Rutgers over Harvard. Penn has an overtime win over Richmond. Is that the wake-up call for Penn coming out of the Ivy League tournament? For Rutgers, was it too easy against Harvard? Are they going to rest on their laurels now moving into the next game? So biorhythm-wise, I'm not really sure where to peg this one. If you want to go to X's and O's for this, I'm looking at the Rutgers rope unit against the midfield of Penn with, of course, Sam Hanley. And the Rutgers rope unit has 2 All-Americans on their squad. So they've got Ethan Rawl, and then you have the short stick Brennan Commish. So you have these guys that are really talented against what many people think is Penn's strength. So that is the matchup I'm watching here.
So, first of all, Sam Hanley, if he doesn't get a pole like one of their close defensemen, there's a problem with Rutgers' defensive strategy. Because
that's also
he is the guy. The thing that is scary about planning for Penn, if you're the Rutgers defense this week, is that any given week here over the last 4 or 5, it's been somebody else for Penn that's shown up. Because Sam Hanley's getting his, like, you know that. But you look back at some of their other big games here down the stretch. I point back to that St. Joe's game because that Penn comeback in the 4th quarter against St. Joe's was really impressive. We saw how good St. Joe's was this past weekend against Yale. But Gabe Fury in that had a season-high 3 goals and 5 points, including what went on to be the game-winning goal. I think he scored all 3 of those goals in the 4th quarter, by the way. So he was the coming-out star there in that St. Joe's game. Against Brown in the semifinals of the Ivy League tournament, it was Dylan Gergar goes off for 5 goals. He's more of a known. But then against Richmond, Ben Smith, as of a month ago.
First year.
Yeah. As of a month ago, Ben Smith had 2 goals. April 22nd, he had 2 goals on the season. He scored 5 goals against Richmond to lead them to victory, and now he's gone off. Like, he has been one of their hottest offensive players here down the stretch of the season, including in that Ivy League tournament that Penn walks away with in winning. So for Rutgers, it's almost Penn has the feel of Virginia over the last couple of years in terms of they've kind of figured it out here at the right time of the season. And if you're Rutgers, you're looking up and down and you look at different games they've played, and I don't know how you figure out your matchups because you're going to probably have to evolve the game because they've got a lot of guys that maybe haven't proven themselves yet for Penn, but are showing up in big moments.
I wonder, though, if Penn has a similar issue with Rutgers. I mean, Rutgers has shown that they've had offensive depth really all year long, and we wonder who the guy could be, and I think that Penn also has some things to think about on the defensive end. They do have Patrick Birkinshaw, and I think that he could very well be the X factor here. I know we talk about different players, and goalies can be that, and he had 15 saves against Richmond. Really good offense. Richmond only scoring 10 goals in that game, so they needed every one of those saves from Birkinshaw. And it wasn't one of those things where, they were, there was an up and down battle where those were saves that, he just happened to make. 15 saves against a good Richmond offense in an overtime game at that. I think that Birkinshaw might be the most important player in this game with that Rutgers offense just coming off a 19-goal game at that. So, I think that Penn can't let Rutgers get off as many shots as they did, and they have to be much more and hope that this game is a little bit slower defensively as well.
I think Penn also can't dig themselves into a hole like they have at times this year. This needs to be the Ivy League tournament Penn team and not even the Penn team I think we saw against Richmond in the opening round. Because I think Rutgers, if they get going, like this is a Rutgers team, when they start moving, I saw them play Hofstra, and they scored 22 goals the second time in a week. When they get going and they're feeling themselves, it's over. Like they will run all over you. And now I don't think Penn defensively will let that happen, but you can't let them get hot because they, I think, more than almost any team in the country, when their shooters get hot, they stay hot.
Yeah, and I think that's a tribute to the development they've had. And like we talked about on Tuesday, some of the depth that they've been able to procure both through the transfer portal and just through growing in their own program, which has made them really dangerous. And I think this is gonna be really interesting from a standpoint of, I know we have these matchups, but the Ivy League against Big Ten, you know, the Ivy League champion against the second team in the Big Ten, a Rutgers team that we thought all year long, you know, they were all year long a top 5 team in the country. So is this really legit, you know, as terms of Rutgers being sort of the second tier to Maryland all year long? I think that's really intriguing to see what exactly the Ivy League looks like. They're best against maybe the second best from the Big Ten this year.
Yeah, and I also wonder when you look, I mean, Penn is as battle-tested as any team in the country, but I also think Rutgers is too, between some of the games they had in the non-conference and the Big Ten play. I wonder, does the momentum of that Ivy League tournament, because that's, I think, when everybody was like, wait, maybe Penn could do this. And I wonder if that confidence and the momentum they've built, I wonder if that's enough to get Penn over the hurdle.
Yeah, I mean, you look at who's left in the tournament. We were talking about it with Maryland, Virginia. I mean, that would be, if it's not Virginia for Maryland, this is the toughest competition they have, Penn, maybe. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, the way they looked in the Ivy League, at their best, they are the best. They were not their best in the first round. So if they bring that performance again, they're going to lose. Right? I mean, you can't.
Yeah, I do. They have to play better than they did against Richmond.
They have to play much better. And Richmond, no slouch at all.
Great team.
They're a great team all year long, and maybe should have scored a few more goals in that game, as I alluded to. So that's something that Penn has to contend with moving forward here. I think that's a tough game to pick if you're going to try to choose one. Because it's so dependent on, you know, Rutgers goes on a run, can Penn even keep up with that? Or if Sam Hanley starts to get going, you've seen that for Penn too, where the offense just starts flowing through Hanley and it's coming at you from all different angles. So this is a tough game to really nail down of either of these teams.
One thing, face-off X, I do think will be very even. I think both these teams have been okay at the face-off X. Neither one of these teams has a great guy that's going to take over the game. So I think that's even, which I think evens out some of the runs, because I don't think you have a team that's going to make it take it over and over again. Maybe a little X factor. This game's at Hofstra on Long Island. Rutgers played there this year. A game that you actually can see on Lax Sports Network right now. Scored 22 goals against Hofstra. It's a very different competition they're playing now, but hey, you know what? There's always something to be said for feeling good. It's also the same field they lost to North Carolina on last year in overtime in this round.
Wow, okay.
Chance for some redemption.
Yeah, the only other thing that I would tilt toward Penn is just the X Factor guys. Guys that can win games as individuals. And you have Handley in that. Gergar has been really good for them too. And BJ Farrar, the LSM,
yes,
the kind of guy that can get a takeaway, go down the other end and score and change the entire complexion of a game. I'm not saying there's guys on Rutgers that can't do that. I think the guys on Penn just a little bit more able to do that in a situation like this, as we've seen them do it all year long.
I love the LSM matchup with
Rawl
and Farrar,
yeah.
two of the best in the country. That's rope units are terrific in this matchup. So I don't know. Do you have a pick?
I
don't.
I'll ride with Rutgers here.
All right.
I'll go with Rutgers. I was out on, I guess it wasn't out, but I wasn't picking Rutgers all year long, but now I'm convinced. I'm in. You know, they've convinced me. I like the way their offense works. I think it's a little bit different than some of these other teams are structured. You know, it doesn't have to be one guy. It can be. It doesn't have to be. And I think that gives them a little bit more to play with when it comes to being a difficult game plan for a team like Penn.
I really like Ross Scott and Rutgers, but I picked Penn to go to the Final Four at the beginning of this thing. So I think I got to ride with Penn. I'll go with Penn, though. I could see either one of them.
I can't remember what I picked.
Okay.
Yeah,
anyway.
I'm picking Rutgers here.
Final matchup of this quarterfinal weekend that we're talking about. This game is also on Saturday. Yale and Princeton, the 4-5 matchup. Once again, a rematch of the regular season because we got two Ivy League teams. Yale won 14-12. I did some digging back into that matchup.
Yeah.
And
what you got?
Yale won just 10 of 28 faceoffs against Tyler Sandoval and still came away with the 2-goal win. Tyler Sandoval, of course, has continued to be great for Princeton at the faceoff X. But Matt Brandau went off. 8 points. And I was doing some more digging. We're about to hear from Matt Brandau, by the way. 11 games this season for Matt Brandau that he has 6 or more points. I mean, thinking again, How is he not a Tewaaraton finalist?
I was a first-team All-American, not a Tewaaraton
How
finalist.
is he not a Tewaaraton finalist?
He was a first-team.
Because
I mean, if you need any proof, there you go.
Yale is.
We were saying it the day they were released.
Yeah, I mean, Yale's very well could end up in the Final Four because I think I like him in this matchup again after they beat him the first time. Could very well end up in the Final Four and have a guy who was a first-team All-American attackman and not have a Tewaaraton finalist. And the guy that, if they win a championship, would be the guy that would win the award.
Yeah, right. He should. He deserves it too.
Head scratching to me.
He deserves it.
Because it's not like this was a one-year thing. Like,
No.
he's just been building.
Yeah, right.
He was this guy back in 2020. He was a big piece of the team in 2019 that went all the way to the championship game.
We talked about that a little bit.
I mean, Jackson Morrill was the quote-unquote guy,
Right.
but Brandau was a big piece of that.
Yeah, he was. So I got a couple things that intrigue me. You touched on the last time they met. That was one of the worst games Princeton played all year long. They turned the ball over 23 times. They went 17 of 24 on the clear. They shot horribly. They're normally at 32%. They only shot 23%. Paquette made 19 saves for Yale in that game.
He did.
So there was a lot of factors that led to Yale's win there, too.
You're right.
You know, and I think that Princeton...
It was also at Yale.
Yes, it was also at Yale. And I think that for Princeton, and I know that there was an article in Inside Lacrosse about it, too, but I was thinking about this, that the fact that they missed the Ivy League tournament may be the best thing that happened to them this year. Don't forget, the last 2 weeks of the regular season, you lose 19-16 to Harvard, 18-15 to Cornell. And then you see how they came back against BU, a team that won the Patriot League, had what we all thought was a really good offense, solid defense, good goalie, and they went 12-5. You know, and that was a better result for them than the regular season one at that, too. So they played better this time around. I think the fact that they were able just to sit back, relax, and just reevaluate things and get themselves out of the gauntlet of the Ivy League and say, okay, let's go back to basics. And I think sometimes for teams, it's like, all right, let's just go back to the drawing board, do the little things really, really well, and see how things go. Let our talent take over the rest. And I think Princeton did that, you know, because they had a couple weeks just to do that. They were kind of under the microscope a bit for the first half or so of the year before the loss to Yale.
Because they had that win over Georgetown.
They had the win over Georgetown. They were the third-ranked team in the country for a long time.
Deservedly so, yeah.
And then you have the end of the season where you could probably feel that pressure coming on for a lot of inexperienced guys. And I think for us, that's the biggest thing. We talked about that. None of these guys ever played in the NCAA tournament before. And then they go out and win the first game 12-5. So for me, I do think Princeton has a big shot in this game because of the way they've been able to sort of reset and get back to what they were good at the beginning of the year. And everything that we've talked about all year long, offensively, defensively, they can get it done when they're at their best. I mean, Yale, to me, kind of has the X Factor feel in this game. Like they have
the Virginia.
Right. They have that feel where, like, okay, they've been in the tournament before. We've seen them be successful, even though it's a couple of years removed from the Ivy League. And there's still some guys like Brandau that are layovers from that. So I think Yale sort of has that feel, okay, yeah, they're the team that should win. But Princeton, they feel like they've gone back to their roots at the beginning of the year, which made them one of the best teams in the country all year long. At their best, one of the best in the country. And they could show that in this game against a Yale team that you don't really, they're also pretty young, and I'm not really sure. We've seen them really perform well at times, but you don't know. Maybe they'll have an off day. I don't know.
I think one of the most intriguing parts about this weekend compared to quarterfinal weekends in the past, is the intrigue factor of you've got a bunch of games where they're teams that we haven't seen go to the Final Four in a while.
Yeah.
Whether it's Delaware, Cornell, Penn, Rutgers, Princeton. I mean, you've got possibly three teams that are going to be in the Final Four that are teams that, like, in the beginning of the year or thinking about things as we were trying to break that, like, you never would have picked. Because until you see, in a lot of ways, like, until you see somebody do it, it's really hard to buy in and believe that that team could be on that stage until you've seen it be done. So that's why I think, like, picking Virginia over Maryland when we've seen Maryland do what they've done all year doesn't seem completely outrageous because we've seen Virginia do this. Picking Yale to win this game over Princeton feels right because we've seen Yale do it on this stage multiple times in a row. So that's, I think, the most intriguing part is what wins out, because I think this is such an even matchup. I think both sides have. I think Princeton probably has the edge defensively. I think I would give Yale a slight edge on the offensive end, but they're pretty even. Face-offs, you got Princeton with the edge. I think the goalie play has been pretty even because I think both Paquette and Peters both can stand on their heads in any given game. I think it's a really even matchup, and I will be really interested to see how it plays out.
I think Princeton can do a little bit more to you offensively than Yale, the way they've structured this offense.
Well, the Yale offense, the attack unit combined for 18 points in the first
Their
round.
attack unit's great, and then you go to Princeton, they're a pretty good midfielder, and Jake Stevens, a third-team All-American well. So, and they've got Slusher and Brown and guys that have been around a little bit, too. They've got some experience on the same lines. I guess I'm kind of talking myself into Princeton on
You
this.
are. I think you're all in.
And I agree with you that teams and programs that
I'm not
been
saying
here before,
it's a bad thing. I think it's just harder. Sometimes it's harder to pick.
I know, but this is also different in that this is a league matchup, too. I feel like that also is a factor here. Princeton and Yale, they met in the season. They're two Ivy League teams. So some of that, to me, does get taken away on the fact that, Yale's been on this stage. They'll get there. Everyone's going to feel the stage. And then I think you start playing, you're like, oh, this is an Ivy League game. I think that also plays a factor here.
I think so, too. I mean, I'm like torn on whether that's a good or a bad thing for Princeton. Because I think sometimes, like, you get on this stage the first time, like, I think, like, would they be better off, like, if they had matched up with Rutgers here? A team that obviously they're familiar with, I think in a similar way that they're familiar with Yale because their proximity and how often they play. But it's another team that hasn't been here before. And now there are a lot of new pieces on this Yale team from the team that played in 2019.
Yeah.
Like, remember, it's been a couple of years since they've had a chance to be on this stage.
Yeah.
But there has been something about what Andy Shea has figured out in the water of, like, how do you get your team playing the best lacrosse at the right time? And that game against St. Joe's really reminded me of their game a couple years ago against Georgetown in the first round when it was like this back and forth game.
It was wild. Yeah.
Who was it for Georgetown who went off?
Boy. Yeah, I know you. Wasn't Caraway?
No, it was before Caraway. He went on to play
the guy
in the
before
PLL.
Caraway, right? Yeah.
I'll get it here in a second. But that game reminded me a lot of this game that we saw against St. Joe's. Back and forth, like, let them fly, let's go. This is going to be a different game, but I think that the feeling of that, like the offensive boost that they got from going out and scoring 18 goals the first round, that confidence for especially guys like a Leo Johnson, who's a first-year guy, I think helps a lot. I think it takes some of the pressure off.
Yeah, we'll hear from Matt Brandau in just a moment here. And, St. Joe's took more shots than Yale in that game. So that's another factor here that, St. Joe's even won some categories. And that, to me, is a good learning lesson for a team that's pretty young in Yale. You look at some of the guys around there, and, Princeton also is young to their own end and standpoint, too. But they have some of the people that were around there for the Michael Sowers era as well. So you have that kind of laying over some of these guys and saying, okay, now we're doing it without them. And then the recruiting because of that. We talked about that with BU a little bit with Chris Gray, kind of the impact there, and saying, okay, Chris Gray moved on, but look at where our program is now after he left, for better or for worse. And you can say that Princeton has experienced the same thing. You can say the same thing over the women's game with Charlotte North leaving Duke. Look at what Duke did after that. A proof that these programs aren't just recruiting these once in a generation type athlete like a Michael Sowers or a Charlotte North, but they're also recruiting athletes through and through, and that's who they're bringing in on a yearly basis. And that's how far I think that Princeton has even come in the last few years, where they weren't doing as good of a job in that. And then you saw with Sowers, like, well, he came from something like he was pretty legit from the start. He was great for his entire career there. And then everybody else came along and said, oh, now they are working in the recruiting game. And that's why Princeton is where they are now. Sowers brought them to this point, and now this program, like a tidal wave, has carried them over that. And I think that talent has been around them for a while. So they have that going for them, while Yale has some of the history to their side, too.
Yeah, for sure. By the way, Daniel Buccaro. Went off for 8 goals.
Yeah, he played in the MLL, too, right?
He did. Yeah, that was an unbelievable performance and a losing effort. But yeah,
T.D. Erlin set the face-off wins record. Didn't he go like 26 for 27 or something?
And Buccaro still had Georgetown in that game.
I know, right? That was
wild.
Thing. Yeah, that was one of those crazy games.
I don't think this is going to be like that. I think it'll probably be score-wise more similar to what we saw the first meeting.
Yeah. I think it'll be similar. Like I said, the first meeting, Princeton played one of their worst games of the year. So I think I'm on Princeton.
All right.
We'll see.
I picked Yale once again. I picked Yale in the beginning of this tournament to go, so I'm going to stick with the Bulldogs. But I I think it's a one-goal game.
And I think even if I'm on the Princeton side, Matt Brandau is going to have a day because he is one of the best attackmen in the country, as we know.
First-team All-American.
He is. I spoke to him after their win over St. Joe's. Here's that interview. All right, so Matt Brandau does join us now coming off that grinded-out win over St. Joe's. I guess you could call it one way or another. Survive in advance, I guess, is that the feeling for you guys after that one, Matt?
St. Joe's was definitely a great test for us. They were a tremendous team and definitely pushed us to our limits and showed us some good weaknesses for us to work on this week. But, they're a great team, and all credit to them for a fantastic year. But we are super excited to get moving on to Princeton.
Well, what are some of those things that you might need to do better against Princeton to be able to advance the championship weekend?
Right. Well, I mean, watching Princeton's game against Boston, their defense played incredibly. And I think that we have to take care of the ball really well, especially on the offense and clearing the ball. We need to execute our details very well, just to make sure that we're not giving them chances because they'll definitely take advantage of them.
How different or what do you take away from that first meeting from Princeton? You played them in New Haven and won by 2 that day. What do you take from that? Is it a completely different feel, different season? What's the philosophy there?
I think, we like to look at those games that have already happened in the Ivy League as kind of washes. And, now it's a new week. It's a new team. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of adjustments on both ends. So we're going to try and just take it as a completely new game and forget about what happened before because, both teams have changed a lot and grown a lot since we last played.
You think about the Ivy League and how well the Ivy League played this year, especially out of conference, and then, of course, competing against each other after a year completely off, a year and a half completely off. What do you think made the league so good?
I think it's a credit to a lot of the coaching staffs and a lot of the players that work so hard in the time off. A lot of people could have mailed it in and taken some time to relax or some vacation time. But I think that you can just tell that most of the guys in the league and a lot of the coaching staffs put in a ton of extra work and took it as an advantage to maybe look in the mirror and find some things that they weren't doing so well, like myself included, and really work on some of the weaknesses to make us better when we came back.
How much do you think mentality plays into that, the hunger to get back out there?
Oh, it was huge. It was definitely very difficult to sit on the sidelines and watch, everybody play the entire season last year. But it definitely added a lot of motivation for us to work even harder and put ourselves in a good spot coming into this year.
Probably some pride, I'd imagine, see the 6 teams getting in. They say, okay, guys, we're back. One of those things.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it was a great year for the Ivy League as a whole. Even Dartmouth, who didn't get in, played teams very tough this year and presented themselves as a great challenge every game. So it was definitely a strong showing from the Ivy League and something for the whole league to be proud of.
Interesting. Obviously the last time you guys had a chance to even compete in this tournament was 2019. You go to the championship game and lose to Virginia there. How different is this group compared to that year in 2019 when you were a freshman?
Oh, it's an entirely different group. I was thinking about that actually today. I think we had 3 senior midfielders on the first line, Jackson Morrill and Matt Gaudette playing attack. And now a lot of times we have 4 or 5 freshmen on the field offensively. Defense is a different look as well. So it's a completely new team, but I think that we still have the same core concepts and the same heart as those groups. So I think we hope to present a strong showing on Saturday and hopefully move forward.
I mean, you probably learned a lot from that experience. You tell some stories from that weekend. How does that work and kind of passing some of that stuff down?
We do like to kind of talk about our experience, but I think we want them to, we have 30 guys that have never been there before. So we want them to experience it and take it as their first time and kind of have an open mind going into it, not feel too much pressure. So I think we're trying to treat it just like any other week and not maybe talk about it as much. Just a neutral site game.
Yeah, you go back to what you were talking about before and, you guys not playing for a year and a half to establishing a chemistry rather quickly, with your teammates. That might allude to some of the work you mentioned. I guess, how were you able to do that over the course of this season? Is it more of, okay, back in a game action, learning on the fly, or is it we already had this set in when the season started? Just being able to click and perform so well.
I think it's definitely difficult to do. A lot of it does come from practice, but there's a certain amount of that chemistry that can only come through game experience and through actually, playing a different team together and going through some challenging times of games together. So, a lot of credit goes to the first years like Chris Lyons and Leo Johnson that have worked incredibly hard to put themselves in a position to succeed and put in a lot of extra work that after practice, working together with myself and just those two guys. A lot of it does come from games, but I think that the ability for them to listen to both myself and the coaching staff and the older guys and add their own flair has been huge for adding the chemistry.
Do you feel like you went from kind of young like those guys to kind of old really quickly? You know what I mean?
Quickly.
You went from a first year to a junior really quickly in your fourth
absolutely.
year there.
Oh, yeah. So it was definitely a crazy fast switch. And, we did have that whole year off. We were kind of thrown right into leadership roles when we got back. So it was an adjustment. But I think that, the senior class led by Brian Tevlin, the captain, and guys like Chris Fake and Luke Eschbach, stepped up in a huge way and never put too much pressure on the guys in my class, the juniors, to fill those leadership roles, but kind of allowed us to grow into them. So it was definitely a difficult and unexpected transition, but it was rather smooth in my opinion.
And we were just talking before we put the cameras on here just about that year. Of course, you didn't play lacrosse. You worked professionally a bit and got yourself developed that way. That probably, also pays some dividends on the field too, I'd imagine.
Oh, absolutely. I think I grew up a lot during the year off. From, a standpoint of myself coaching and also working, I learned to deal with adversity in completely different situations. And it helped me figure out how to stay calm and also present myself in a calm manner, even if maybe I wasn't feeling so calm on the inside. So it definitely helped me grow up a lot.
What's it like having Joe Tsai be such an active alum, and so supportive of your program? Someone like that who's so invested in lacrosse?
It is tremendous. And it's unlike anything else that I've experienced in the sport and unlike any other place. Honestly, the Tsai Center, the Tsai Field House, the new building is amazing. And there's so many great, new tools that we have in that building for both treatment and weightlifting. And it is incredible to have the support of such, a generous and also kind person behind us.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. And obviously, as we've seen, he's really put his heart and his paycheck into the world of lacrosse beyond just Yale, too, which I think has got to be pretty neat for you guys. Have you met him at all?
I have. I've met him a couple of times. He's so nice, so humble. And you can just tell that he loves the game. He loves when it's played the right way. And I think that's the most important part.
One more thing I wanted to ask you about before we leave here is the World Games. You're on the Sixes roster for Team USA, and that's something that you've worked with in the group and Andy Shea as well now for a couple years at least. Have you seen any of those little things you might have picked up be implemented into what you've done this season?
Oh, absolutely. I think, a lot of pick play that goes into the Sixes, similar to the box style lacrosse, has been implemented by a lot of teams. Whether or not they really know that it relates to the Sixes, I'm not sure, but there's a lot more pick play going on, and it's a lot of savvy kind of working off ball stuff as well. So that stuff has really been implemented, and I think it's helped me grow my game as well.
Well, you can see Matt and his squad take on Princeton this Saturday, 2:30 p.m. Eastern in Hempstead, New York. Matt, we appreciate your time and good luck this weekend, all right?
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
So, yeah, also excited to see Matt playing with the Sixes team coming up this summer. So
yeah,
he's
really
going to be
cool.
a busy man, as they say. And we'll have Andy Shea as well.
Yeah, that team playing the World Games in Birmingham, Alabama this summer for Sixes. Should be a lot of fun.
Yep, the new format on display, as they say.
But first things first, you got to see if you can get his team to championship.
Yeah, I think that's the thing on his mind right now.
I think so, too.
All right, so we had a couple women's games over the course of this taping take place.
Yep.
The other two, the later ones, aren't, this is dated
Yeah, we won't. Yeah, we won't talk about the second two. Syracuse Northwestern and North Carolina Stony Brook happening after this taping. So we'll talk about those on Tuesday. But we can talk about Maryland, Florida, and Loyola Boston College because one half of championship weekend is set by the time we're taping.
You know what's interesting, and we talked about this on Tuesday when we were looking ahead to the Boston College Loyola game.
Yep.
And we were talking about the styles of play and how Denver worked the shot clock, tried to really slow things down. And you were on the team. We weren't really on teams. We were discussing, well, Loyola maybe should play their game. They can hang with Boston College if they, pick things up and go in transition as quick, and score the goals like they can. I said, well, maybe they could also consider what Denver did, because Denver kept that game pretty close. A couple things went Boston College's way, and Boston College a better team on that day too, even playing in that format. And what Loyola decided to do against Boston College was slow things down. And you saw BC get on that run, and they got possession. They got a few draw controls in a row. And that, I think, hurt Loyola, as they really never got, especially in that first half, into a real rhythm on offense, because they slowed things down, I think, a little bit too much, even to a fault in that game. So Boston College, an incredible performance in the quarter. I mean, you scored 20 goals in the quarterfinal. You're doing something right. So they move on. They look primed once again. This is postseason BC, man. And when you get out of their way, because watch out, they beat a Loyola team, held them to 13 goals in the process. One of the best
20
offenses in the country.
Yeah, they scored.
Offense, defense, they did it all today. Holly Schleicher was unbelievable. She was unbelievable to watch. She's incredible.
And you look at some of the stats.
Yeah.
Belle Smith scored 7 goals.
Yeah.
So it's like with Boston College, and this is what I think you started to get a feel for down the stretch, is that it's like pick your poison, because obviously you have to have attention on Charlotte North, because you know what she can do. She's one of the best. She is the most prestigious goal scorer in the history of women's college lacrosse.
Yeah.
But she goes off for 3 and 3, and then you let Belle Smith, who is just weaving her way through the defense and finding her way to 7 goals. Oh, and then, by the way, Jen Medjid also adds 5 goals.
Yeah.
So, it's pick your poison with this team, because other than maybe North Carolina, I don't know if there's another team that has enough defensive pieces. And I guess we'll find out with Maryland here in the semifinals if they've got enough. But that's the question: is do you have enough defenders that can lock down this defense? Because even if you throw a zone at them, Charlotte North is going to get you into 1,000 shooting spaces calls and is going to line up free positions left and right.
Yeah.
So there aren't a lot of options you have to try to stop them.
And you look at experience. We talked about that on the men's side in the first. And BC they've had it now for a year, from class after class. The athletes that have come and gone, they have the experience in these games. And you've seen that come out, and they just have this confidence as they step on the field. And Loyola, there was 4-4, I think, at one point, and then BC went off on that big long run. Loyola, it felt like they were in it, and then all of a sudden BC turned on that extra gear. Rachel Hall made a couple of saves in the process, and they won a bunch of draws. And that, to me, is a hard thing for anybody to stop. And now they match up with a team in Maryland who blew out Florida today. And I think that obviously we're looking at this BC Loyola game because that was a little bit more of a competition in terms of the game and the competitiveness level. Florida, they had a great season, just a little young just yet for this stage.
Probably a year or two away.
And they don't play in the Patriot League either. So it's a little bit different there too. So you look at now this matchup between Maryland and Boston College, a brief look ahead here, and I think that this could be one of the better matchups we've seen. And this is a championship matchup from 2019.
Yep.
BC losing to Maryland. Megan Taylor ended up going out and winning the tour time with her performance there. I think this is going to be really interesting because Maryland, as BC flexed their muscles today, Maryland did the same.
Well, and Maryland has owned this matchup.
Yes.
This has been... the year that Boston College finally got over the hurdle was the year that Maryland wasn't in the Final Four.
Yeah, the first year in years.
Right. So, which I think makes this semifinal so awesome. Mm-hmm. It's the team, Maryland, that has been constantly in Boston College's way, facing off against the now defending champion Boston College. This is okay. Maryland's saying to Boston College, okay, you guys won the championship, but that was our down year. Now we're back.
Yeah.
Now what you got? So this semifinal is going to be epic. Just quickly looking at what Maryland did against Florida, they scored 18 goals. The fact that they held Florida to 5 is a big deal. And then offensively, Libby May with 5 more goals. She's been terrific in this tournament.
Big time. Yep.
Victoria Hench with 3, Hannah Lubecker with 3, Aurora Cordingley with 3. They are starting to show. Aurora Cordingley stole the show at the beginning part of the season for Maryland, and I think it was like a way to bring some of these players along. All the other players are there now with Maryland. They have more scoring depth now than I think people thought they did at the beginning of the year.
Yeah, and they took a year to sort of develop that too. You know, for Maryland,
100%.
It's very rare because they keep on rebooting. But then you look in the transfer portal, they get the the best offensive player in the Big Ten, the best defensive player in the Big Ten. Aurora accordingly, Abby Bosco. That was what it was called this year. You had the best goalie, Emily Sterling. So there are a lot of things going the way of Maryland, and you go and you rail these two teams together. It's going to be an explosive semifinal.
Emily Sterling, I think, is the X factor in this game.
Yeah.
If she has some of the games that she's had and she can stop, because that's the question is, can you stop BC? Because I think Maryland will be able to score at the other end, but can you stop BC enough times so that you can find a way to win this? And I think she can be an X factor.
I mean, and Caitlin Larson's a good goalie. She was really good all year long. She's an experienced goalie at that, but BC was hitting corners. It was just like she was trying to face like a tidal wave of Eagles, or I guess a flock.
Flock of Eagles
would be more appropriate here. But a tidal wave, and it'll be a tidal wave, of Eagles again for Emily Sterling to try and navigate. And if you get a couple stops, and I think also the draw is going to be really important, and you always say that, but you can't let BC win 2 or 3 or 4 in a row, because we saw that happen today to Loyola, and that's when they were on their heels. It was like, and then they get stopped on one end by Rachel Hall, and then BC comes in transition and they score. So that's when things really went the other way for Loyola. So Maryland's got to be very cognizant of that and not get taken on their heels again. I know it's almost like they've been a different team, a very inspired team since the loss to JMU. And I can't wait to see, when they're faced with a competition like this on this stage, this group of Maryland Terrapins, with all the history, all the alums watching, how they will do, this certain group. Because this is a group that, hasn't been there like the other ones had year after year too.
Yeah, because this is why you go to Maryland, is for this to be on this stage playing this game. And so the BC thing I think is so intriguing because they haven't beat Maryland here. Maryland had been the team for how long that had been the thorn in their side, that had stopped their runs every year. Well, they finally get to the Final Four. They don't have to play Maryland. They had to play an incredible North Carolina team. They didn't have to play Maryland.
Right.
So now they got to play Maryland. And now what do you have, and can you defend your title? Yeah,
I mean, it's a tribute to the ACC that BC once again emerges from their quadrant, and what a job that Acacia Walker-Weinstein's done.
Yeah.
I mean, this is and we knew that last year, but this is a program that
it's not going anywhere.
Is not going anywhere, and because everyone after the big three, you had Dempsey Arsenault, Sam Apuzzo, Kenzie Kent. It was like, okay, now they're moving on. What's going to happen now? They go and win a title.
They didn't get it done with them. They just get it done after they leave.
Man,
it's unbelievable.
Really impressive. And congratulations to BC. I mean, I wasn't sure, as as the season went on, and that kind of the way it's gone for them, in the regular season. But when they turn things on in the tournament, it is scary, and you can't count them out. And I know some other teams sort of rose, a bit more to the occasion this year. But once again, that experience paying off for BC when it counts the most.
So we know we've got one blockbuster semifinal. We'll figure out the other ones here later on tonight on Thursday, and we'll figure out the men's stuff over the weekend. Going to be an awesome weekend of lacrosse. I hope you enjoy it. It's going to be hot on the East Coast, so
drink
maybe
your water.
Some AC, drink some water.
Hydrate.
Watch a lot of lacrosse. We will talk to you on Tuesday again. We'll know all the Final Four matchups. We'll break them down. But for now, he's Tom. I'm Travis. We'll see you.